Morning, it's Celeste of Astrology by Celeste here with a cosmic conversation at a early time because my guest is in Europe. Okay, let's see. Here we go. Okay. Welcome everyone. I made it. I made it to LA and I made it home back again. I'm so happy. Hi Sabrina, so good
Hi,
to see you
Celeste.
again.
Good to see you.
How are you?
I'm good. It was a beautiful day here in Greece. It was like the summer came back and people were at the beach. So I'm
Oh,
feeling good. Yeah, how are you
I
doing?
am doing good, although I'm jealous that you got out of town just in the right
Yeah,
time.
yeah. I live here now, but
I, I
yeah.
know. That's what I mean.
Okay. Yeah.
What part of Greece are you in?
I'm in Crete.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Okay, so I'm a little skedaddled today because I went to LA and back on this quick trip and my flights were all delayed. So I'm a little
Yeah,
skedaddled. So,
Mercury shadow,
yeah.
unfortunately. Yeah.
This was so funny yesterday. My flight was delayed, then delayed again, and then moved back up. So it was so Mercury in the retrograde shadow. It was just in
Yeah, well, I hope
Sagittarius.
you caught your flight
I
so
did.
you weren't like, okay.
I did. I'm back home. I did my business meeting and everything, so everything's great. But introduce yourself, please, to people who don't know you.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm a practicing evolutionary astrologer. That's like the most all-encompassing or kind of convenient title for what I do. But since getting into evolutionary astrology in my early 20s, it guided me to a number of different initiations, just kind of following Pluto and following like what my natal chart was saying. So I ended up going to grad school for cosmology or philosophy, cosmology, and consciousness. I've been teaching astrology since like 2018, um, evolutionary astrology. And I've also been in like the coaching world for a couple of years now. So evolutionary astrology is the main lineage that my work is rooted in. And yeah, I'm a Pisces rising, Aries sun, and Taurus moon. Uh,
Ah, I'm an
yeah,
Aries moon and Taurus sun.
okay, I remember we had something in common. Yeah,
Mhm. Oh, I love that. Yes. And so are you the Jeff Wolf Green School of Evolutionary Astrology? Oh,
yeah, for sure. He's
okay,
the
because that's
OG. Yeah.
Yeah, and just tell people a bit about evolutionary astrology and the way you practice it.
Yeah,
Or, I mean, we can have the whole conversation about that, but
totally.
give a kickoff about that and how it's different from a lot of people know Stephen Forrest, the nodes focus. So if you could just
Right.
give a little bit about that.
So Jeffrey Wolf Green, he's Pluto and lunar node focus. He wrote Pluto Volume 1, which I think is like the Bible for evolutionary astrology. We end up looking at charts like with Pluto and the lunar nodes first. So it was, even like in my class right now, we were just talking about the luminaries, and I confessed like there were a couple years I really underlooked the sun and the moon. Like I would just care way more about the outer planets. So it is an unusual way to get into the chart, but it tells a portrait of the soul's narrative from life to life. So like the thing that you from prior lives are still working on and still are so gripped by that you came back and incarnated again, to work on those themes once more. So I think it tells like a very kind of like x-ray version of the chart. It may not be the most like day-to-day personality side of the chart, but it's like this deeper undercurrent, that gets connected to like our deeper desires and maybe power struggles or deeper sources of angst, yeah, throughout our lives.
Oh, beautiful. Okay. And so you look at Pluto first, and then you look at the lunar nodes. Do you want to say anything a little bit about Pluto in each of the signs that people might have? Just
Sure, like
some
people alive.
people alive. Yeah,
Yeah,
not all 12, because we know we don't have anyone. Do we have
yeah,
anyone? Well, people with Pluto and Cancer are still alive, right?
yeah. I mean, my grandparents, Pluto and Cancer, yeah, but
Mhm.
they have passed. But yeah, I guess I could start with, I mean, Pluto and Cancer, I would just say there was like a really strong, I think, gender role thing happening. Like there was a kind of like the nuclear family and like the breadwinner and the homemaker and just like these clear roles that I think were really like glamorized and kind of like I Love Lucy eyes like during that time. Um, Pluto and Leo really, so Pluto, I'll just say like it speaks to shadow and talents and gifts. So there's like a range, right, of how these will show up. But the Pluto and Leo generation or the boomers, um, there's a sense of, being like creators with Leo, like being here to um, like really bring life to their own, creative visions. And socially, like there was a lot of I think it was like a generation where like buying a home and like having a career and having like the like feeling taken care of at the job or something like that was stronger, right? So there was maybe more of this sense of like we can create, but of course there's criticism of like the narcissism or that kind of energy of Leo or that generation.
It's like the
Um,
I've been moved. Was that the IBM generation where, or was that
uh,
the next one?
I don't know about that. What is that?
Mhm. So IBM, the company is what, but in corporate America, there were a lot of things as executives started to rise up the ladder. Part of the journey was you had to just like move somewhere else to show like you could work in a different organization in different places, and people were moved all over the country, all over the world, and it really caused, I think, a lot of disconnection from that Cancer energy, because
Yeah.
you had to show your stuff, your Leo, by
Yeah.
totally uprooting your whole life and
It's like
going.
some of the boss energy. I feel like Leo can be very like director kind of consciousness. So like the powerful boss maybe or trying to like, show loyalty to the company all feels kind of like Leo theatrics maybe for that generation. But
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah,
um
my father we had moved to Canada and in California for a year, as
wow.
part of his like for
How
his
was that for
company. It was
you?
very destabilizing for the whole family. And you know what? I'm so bad. I told you I was skedaddled today. I'm kind of turned upside down. But I should have had you explain how you look at Pluto before we jumped into Pluto through the sides, because some people watching may not
Oh
exactly
yeah,
know
let's
what Pluto
back
is.
up
So
and do that.
I apologize.
It's all good. I'm like, I mean, I just showed up. Like, I could be, you could say I'm skedaddled also. So, Pluto is like this deeper pulse of our desire. Like, one way that I've explained it is like if you had the opportunity to just like enter nirvana and be done with like reincarnation and be done with this human experience. um, I think that, like, so let's say a portal just appeared and it's like you can just go transcend all of this. People will be like, oh, but like my family, or like, oh, but there was still this thing that I was working on, like this attachment that we have to being incarnate, this desire that we have toward being incarnate. Um, then when we're here on earth, like there are all these challenges and there can be existential moments where we're like, wait, why did I sign up for this? At certain moments. But even those experiences, those lows, those like passages through the underworld are also very plutonic. Like there's a kind of power or deepening that's gained in that underworld. It's a planet of transformation. Right? And so when we think about like our deepest desires and say like a high dream, like what we really want our life to be, and then also our personal nightmare, like our fear of losing that, our fear of not having that attachment, that's all Pluto. So it's like we're here to evolve and learn through the emotional body to actually have these experiences, to go through the life cycle of, bonding deeply with our experiences and loss, detachment, death, rebirth. Like Pluto governs all of that. So it will drive us to exist, drive us to connect, and also be that force of nature that eventually drives us apart from the things that we connected with through events, the end of life, what have you. So it can be very difficult to actually connect with the Plutonic because it's so existential. There's so much about like mortality or loss or deep vulnerability. So we can maybe try to avoid it, right? And so there's also like the desires that are found within Pluto, they will come out sideways if we try to repress them. So there's like a current of nature that's trying to move through us, trying to move through our lives, and we can't really resist it. We have to get right with it. And even if we get right with it, it doesn't mean that we're not going to go through challenges or, ultimately like we will pass and reincarnate and whatnot. So there's not like a deep material security that Pluto offers. There's a temporary bonding with material life. And
Mhm.
it's like the emotional intensity of all of those initiations through the chapters of that story that Pluto relates to. That's how I would describe it to start us off. Do you want to add anything to that?
I love how you describe that. And I pulled a card last night, repression. And I love how you said that. When you talk, because I see Pluto as, ooh, it's very subconscious and being the higher octave of Mars. And so I look at Mars as how we get what we want without concern of anyone else, like a lack of concern, like that internal instinctual drive. Like
Yeah.
if I want that cookie, I'm willing to knock someone out of the way to get that cookie or whatever it is. If I want that person in the corner of the room.
It's a very
Amy Winehouse
toddler.
there's a new movie about Amy Winehouse that I watched on the plane. I only could watch a little of it but it shows like her meeting Blake, and Blake had a girlfriend, her ex-husband, or whatever, her husband, he had a girlfriend, and she didn't care. She just like went in for the kill for him. And that to me was very like that Mars energy, but there was this Pluto subconscious current too. So Pluto's even deeper.
It's ruthless.
It's
Yeah.
ruthless. I don't care. Like she marched into it was more than Mars. It was like she marched into the bar and like just went up to him and planted a
Yeah.
kiss on him, even though the girlfriend was right there. So that's like that's like that Pluto drive, but Pluto doesn't tend to come out like Mars. That's we see the Mars. The Pluto feels like it's like a deeper,
Yeah.
deeper, deeper undercurrent until it
Yeah.
like pops out, and we're like, oh my god, I can't believe we saw something so horrific or brutal or
Yeah.
deeply healing sometimes too with Pluto. It's like that whole like the death and then the rebirth and the power struggle for it. But when you try to repress it, it just like it really gets
Totally.
kind of goes haywire in some ways.
Yeah.
That's
It reminds me of in like a lot of films or TV shows, the plot tends to thicken and get convoluted because a character or a set of characters are lying. They're creating like a web of lies. And the plot will always drive to exposure and reveal, basically. And it won't be like maybe there'll be an internal pressure to confess, or sometimes it's like situations constellate where you just end up face to face with the situation that exposes what the lie was. And so there's something about that pulse of nature in Pluto that is trying to express itself. Um, and it's difficult for people to hold. It's like we're in civilization, we have social conditionings, we have like families that maybe want us to behave a certain way, or we have our own internal complexes, like whatever it is. There's like so much inner kind of turmoil with Pluto between like what is true, like what is the like current of nature that moves through us, how we're trying to stuff that or hide it, what we're trying to be instead. And ultimately, like I think Pluto has a softness or a kindness or a tenderness to it as well. Like when we just, are in deep relationship with our inner nature, but when we repress it or avoid it or make it bad or wrong or ugly or whatever, it gets like it kind of festers in that place that we shove it into, and it makes it, it pressurizes it.
It's like the
Um,
wound oozes when we really try to try to repress it. And
yeah.
when you honor your shadows, and I did some shadow work last night, and everyone here listening may have, because Pluto is at the 0 degree of Aquarius. Aquarius rules groups, associations, friends. Over the last 2 days since Pluto went into Aquarius, have you had any revelations
Yes.
about? Yeah, have you?
Yeah, I had so it's someone that I'll speak to on my podcast, but it was I was set up by a friend. Um it's her ex, and she was like, he's starting this school, like a sex school for men. I was like, cool, I want to learn about this, but his um his presence was very startling and interesting. Like he's been studying like tantric arts and things deeply, committedly for years. And so we just like get on the Zoom call, and I was like, whoa, this is a very, very interesting person. And there's like a palpable like electricity. Um, and it was interesting because before that, I'd been, I'm kind of lonely here in Crete. Like I haven't formed community yet. And I was in this prayer of like, I want to meet people that are doing like interesting and fascinating things. Like I want to, form, a network in Europe. Like, so I just like had that kind of prayer of like, I want to meet interesting people. And then boom, someone showed up who was palpably fascinating. But it just felt like this kind of Pluto and Aquarius thing of um, the way, I'll have him on the podcast. So we were just having like an introductory conversation, but the way he was talking about like the world and how he sees it, he was like standing in this position of like not being ordinary. Like, sex is common and ordinary, obviously, like on the planet, but someone who's like thought about it or like been a practitioner of like these erotic arts, like that was very different, and it inspired me. So I just felt like that was a really Pluto and Aquarius type experience.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah, you met him
yeah,
through a friend, and it was a transformative experience where, like, Pluto energy, like, you feel it from your toes to your head. It is, like, very uncomfortable. It could be like when you meet someone who's going to be your lover, and there's that instant connection. I feel like that palpable, and you just want to possess them. Yeah.
yeah,
But you got this like lightning, like I can feel it. Okay, someone wrote something really interesting. Oh, Palo Sala says one of her revelations, or their revelations, was to meditate on planets their first 24 hours in a sign. So much download.
yeah.
That is fantastic. I love that.
I
Yeah.
woke up from a dream like the first day that Pluto re-entered Aquarius. It was so cool. The dream showed me like a social media post that I was like gonna
Uh-huh.
make, which is like very Aquarian, but it was like, here's your nervous system that you started your business with 10 years ago. And it showed me that I had like outgrown a part of my nervous system, like the paradigm of my own. And this is very Aquarian. Like I think that Aquarius relates to our nervous system and to paradigms, right? So we're going to adhere to the paradigms that we're in, like our mental frameworks and whatnot. But I've been thinking about this in particular with like people's systems. Like there might be something that's personally taboo, like a person who's maybe has peacemaking tendencies. Their nervous system is going to be soothed and kind of happy when there's peace and when they can maintain that. But if there's conflict or something emerging within them that's conflictual, the more intense the taboo of conflict or anger or whatever, it will be suppressed. That's going to relate to a person's personality. So if a person is living that way, they might attract situations that cause them to get very angry, because they're not asserting their boundaries, or they're kind of floaty in this way. And so then that situation will come up where they have to develop their anger, and that's going to burst through that bubble or that paradigm they've created of being a people pleaser, for example.
Sounds like
Um,
Pluto and Libra, maybe.
yeah, we gotta go back to Pluto and Virgo and not skip them. But yeah, very Pluto and Libra. But some of the Pluto and Libras are very extreme in how they do relationships, like whether or not they're like peaceful. I think sometimes they're very it's like the scales with Libra, but Pluto makes the scales so imbalanced sometimes, that Pluto and Libras uh, have taught me so much about relationship. I've learned so much from Pluto and Libras. Like, I feel like they do relationships so deeply, and they get really intense in the way that they do relationship.
Yeah, well, that's their karmic journey. Let's go back to Pluto and Virgo, which is what I have.
Oh, okay. I mean, I'm really curious what your experience of that is. Um, I think Pluto and Virgo like came here to like process and alchemize. And so there could have been disempowerment for Pluto and Virgo people in the form of having like too much to alchemize or process, like things that are irrelevant. And then at some point in the evolutionary journey, realizing like, wow, all that information, like, I've sorted through that. Now I see, I've separated the wheat from the chaff or whatever. And I see like what's important and what's relevant. But yeah, dealing with that excess information. Um, Pluto and Virgos are also very helpful. There's like, I think, a genuine desire to kind of like leave things in reality better than they found it. Um, and with that goes the psychology of like, um, Libra would be like reciprocity, right? Like that. And Virgo's the sign before Libra. So I think in situations of helpfulness, there's like um, there's dynamics that come up around being like a savior or a rescuer or like a martyr of some kind. And so like how to really um, own like one's inherent like conscientiousness and helpfulness, but express it in a way that's empowered for them. And I've seen like Pluto and Virgos, um, I think like one of the shadows or like the monsters that they like face externally are people that are really critical of them. And Pluto and Virgo will kind of take it until they're like, actually, no, I don't have to take this. And so there's something about like, yeah, claiming this sense of helpfulness, this sense of, um, Virgo's willing to look at flaws and be self introspective, and also like, nothing in this reality is perfect, no one is perfect. And so yeah, I think there's something, Pluto and Virgo can also have this gift of being just like willing to really look at the nitty gritty, like cringe things, and like be able to stomach it, and not avoid it, not look away from it, or likewise that journey of getting there where it's like hard to take responsibility or look at things. It's like, oh, it's so cringe to face that. Um,
I'm
so there's this kind of,
fascinated by the cringe. So
yeah.
I have Pluto and Virgo in my third house, and I also have my South Node there, but they're wide apart from each other, but they're both there. So I'm really, and it's really been
Yeah,
coming
South
to.
Node and Virgo too.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a lot. And my,
Yeah.
my Mercury in Taurus in my 11th house trines by Pluto in Virgo. So I'm learning, and I'm a Cancer rising. And this year has been like really transformative as I'm an Aries moon and the North Node's been there. And learning about that need to be helpful, uh, and how it can sometimes be a form of control, like overgiving as a control energy, and I've had some really big lessons and learnings about that shadow Virgo energy of, and I've known like the perfectionism thing and overworking. Like I am like really working hard to work on that, burning down that overworking part of it.
Right. It's like being able to just sit back and let things, like let the chips fall where they may, like let other people clean up their messes, let people be imperfect. Yeah, and sitting with the sensation of the cringe of even just witnessing all of that. If you have that Virgo sight and can like clean things up.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a lot to have in the third
Well,
house of the mind.
yeah, but what a gorgeous ninth house Pisces North Node for being an astrologer. Like,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and like what a gift to have the North Node in Pisces, where you're supposed to let go and just. And I'm really
yeah. I
trying.
was just writing about the North Node in Pisces because we're gonna have that, and it's like, uh, there is kind of like this invitation karmically to let go because you've done the Virgo stuff in prior lives.
Mhm.
Like, it's
And
like if you just
this
go
life for
full,
me.
yeah, yeah. It's a karmic relive. Yeah.
But it's hard when you
Um,
have Pluto there too, because Pluto doesn't want to let go and really tries to hold on.
yeah. Yeah, I feel you.
And any wisdom about Pluto, not Pluto, but the North Node in Pisces, like techniques to let go and just trust your intuition and anything you can think of.
I was just literally writing about this today. So yeah, I think it's about prayer and like, literally it's in your ninth house too. So it's like communion with the divine. And I think that Virgo South Node looks at things through like, what steps do I need to take? It's like very diligent, it's very meticulous, and it's coming from prior lives where that was necessary. Like, one of the examples I feel like Jan Spiller probably uses in the Astrology for the Soul book is like if you were like a ER nurse or something, or a surgeon with all the Virgo, it's like you don't make a mistake because someone's life depends on it. And it's looking at like, I mean, maybe there's been some karmic relive of that if, you know, for people that have like Virgo and they are surgeons or whatever. But it's like looking at where you do have some flexibility to let go and trust, and basically expand. It's like a Jupiter, experience, expand through letting the universe like drive the situation more instead of taking care of all the details yourself, which will create familiarity and control, but also exhaustion. And like that Pisces is going to feed and open the soul.
Yeah, and I'm already preparing. I think one of the things, this is a little off topic, but we have, Mercury going retrograde on Monday, and then Mars going retrograde December 6th, and then Venus in March 1st, and then Mercury again in mid-March. And so between now and April, there is so much retrograde energy of the personal planets. I really feel like everyone is supposed to kind of think about what you can release, really reevaluate how you think, how you plan, how you act, how you connect with others, and what you value in order to prepare us for this massive changes of when Neptune, Saturn, and Uranus all change signs next year, because it's going to be a lot. And the more we can North Node in Pisces, let go and just trust that despite outside circumstances, everything's happening for a reason. We're going to be okay. And our souls, at least, are going to be okay. And
Yes,
trust is
yes,
what I'm getting about this upcoming energy.
exactly. Yeah, that's so on point. And I feel like too, it's like that Pisces part of trust. I mean, it could be like however we get into a kind of cosmic bliss state, if you will. which can feel like not grounded or something like that. But it's like even just accessing that level of like divine love, divine union, like feeling that will start to realign our internal intuition. Because when we're panicking and freaking out and seeing everything as a problem that we have to fix, we get really myopic and narrow, and we're not like opening to that divine connection and guidance. But then inside of that panic, it's like we're so mentally consumed with like, I have to figure it out, I have to solve this problem. It's like connect and then come back, like get into alignment and then take the steps. Like I don't think the Virgo stuff becomes unimportant. It's like we still have to be discerning, we still might be methodical, but it's like just open the aperture, like connect in a bigger way, and then go back to that like one step at a time Virgo process.
I love that. I love that so much. Okay. So we did. Oh, and here's a comment about from Pale Sala. Pluto and Libra can act out their partner's shadow in an intense way. Yeah, awesome if you can handle it. What do you think about that? Acting out your partner's shadow.
I don't know. I mean, I would say, I mean, that might just happen in
Mhm.
general. I don't know. Like, I would say, like, Pluto in the seventh house has this energy a little bit. Um, but I do think Pluto and Libra, like, there is like a really strong uh, dyad kind of thing happening of like deep connection with another person. And inside of that, I do think dynamics come up where it's like that is kind of constellated by the other person's shadow in some sense. Um, but yeah, I don't know. What do you think about it?
Mm. I think it's interesting. Yeah, definitely seventh house, which has like a Pluto and Libra um, energy. I'm going to keep an eye on that and see if I see it more show up now that it's in my conscious attention about, ooh, yeah, looking more to people with Pluto and Libra looking at their seventh house and seeing how that shows
Yeah,
up with their
and it's
partner.
like it's about the mirror. So it's
Mhm.
probably also like there's something about unconscious dynamics occurring in the mirror, you know, and like learning through relationship in order to connect with those unconscious parts.
Yeah. And what would you say about Pluto and Scorpio?
Well, I want to give Pluto and Libra a little more
Oh,
treatment
please.
first.
Yeah,
We,
please.
yeah, it's only fair, you know, for Pluto and Libra that we talk about them. Um, but yeah, like Pluto and Libra. Um, so sometimes I've seen this just like show up as like very deep relationships, connection to relationships, serial monogamy, or like, yeah, just like really being super invested in partnership. There's something about that that like I've encountered a lot of Pluto and Libras that are very charming and charismatic, either naturally or they've literally studied it. Like they've taken like online courses from charisma gurus and like learned how to influence people through charm, which I think is a really interesting power move with Pluto and Libra, whether it's natural or an affect. Um,
You know what?
so worth.
This week, my podcast is called The Pickup Artist, the Celestial Insights podcast. That feels so like exactly. And I mentioned Andrew Tate came to me with the Mercury and Sagittarius opposite Jupiter and Gemini. So and
Yeah,
Sun Neptune. You're talking about that exact energy,
it's
charm as a
interesting.
skill for manipulation.
It's really like I have Venus conjunct my ascendant. I mean, it's like 10 degrees away, but I'll just like take it that I have her conjunct my ascendant. And like I really like charismatic and charming people. Like I don't distrust it inherently, but I've learned over the years more and more how like you have to kind of not get fogged by people's charm basically because it's a glamour. And the reason that I like it though is just that I there's a warmth or there's like a connection or there's it's like music. It's like walking into a place with ambiance. And I do respect the personality trait or the cultivated trait in people that they've taken time to develop their artistry and how they socialize. I don't always think it's manipulative, but I think like Pluto and Libra, it's just like, wow, I've encountered just casually, Pluto and Libra is that just connecting with them in a casual way is such a deep experience because they're really here for it. They're really present and they have these micro relationship skills. And, it's a tricky thing for them in the sense of like they have to find their own authenticity, Aries, Pluto polarity point. Some of them have gotten so swept up or they, have cared about being like the perfect partner. They got so invested that Uranus opposition at 40 and it's like they divorce and there's just like a sense of who am I, like who am I outside of these connections. And it, yeah, this is a problem maybe like Libras can have as well, but Pluto and Libra, I think that whole generation, some of them are, in happy, enduring partnerships. I think a lot of them have like had breakups and dated, and they're kind of trying to figure out how to be in relationship, even though they're naturally so skilled at it. They almost do it too extreme. And then the Aries gets put in shadow of like, well, what do I want? And you have to have both of those to be successful in relationship.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Do you want to add anything to that or?
I know. I think that's great. I think the understanding that your own power in relationships, and yeah, some Pluto and Libra energy can be like having a relationship at all costs, regardless of if it's happy or healthy or what have you. And it's so interesting because today Venus is in Capricorn in a sextile with Saturn in Pisces, and that feels like that energy as well. Like
Committed, yeah.
we're gonna commit no matter how much hard work this is or how unpleasant or how much yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
because they're learning something in the mirror. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
Pluto and Scorpio,
Yes.
that's me. Yeah,
Ah.
that's my generation. So very into um power or the esoteric, the occult, like any kind of hidden mystery, like the fascination with the secrets or the things that, I think a lot of Pluto and Scorpios maybe had that early experience of feeling like there was something going on that no one was talking about. Um, I remember as a kid too, like a lot of the plots in movies involve like, for kids movies, like the kids are aware of some magical thing that's happening and the adults just like can't see it. So I remember at least picking up on that theme as like a repetitive of like, oh, adults don't get it or something. But there was that sense of like, as time went on for me with like Pluto and Scorpio, it became like this fascination with trying to like know things or like understand the nature of reality. And yeah, like Pluto and Scorpio, I think there's also themes around psychological disempowerment and empowerment, like having different experiences, like whatever it is, of feeling just highly disempowered and having to like crawl out of the underworld or scrape out of the underworld or find something to connect and merge with that's going to be more empowering. So even like a person's, paradigm, how a person thinks might be a mental prison. It might not be helping their mental health, for example, and it creates this loop of feeling disempowered. And so there can be that fascination with ideas or teachings or pathways that promise like a greater sense of power, and psychological empowerment.
I wonder if it's the Pluto and Scorpio generation where the American dream started to become out of reach, no matter how hard you work or push or try. So many people can't afford a house or have to, finding any
The
kind of comfort in in life of
Yeah.
like a steadiness is can be really
Yeah.
hard or feel impossible.
You're bringing in the Pluto polarity point with Taurus. Because
Hmm.
actually, I think there is this thing with Pluto and Scorpio of like, we are learning as a generation how to cultivate something steady and how to tend and, to our bodies, to our embodiment, to gardening, like literally, metaphorically. I remember like when the economic crash happened when I was in high school, um, it it was really helpful for me ultimately, but basically like I became less and less normal the older I got. But in high school, I got good grades. I like was a good student and I was, fantasizing about my career, what I wanted to be when I grew up, and it was like all very kind of consensus even though I wasn't like a normal person anyway. But I'd think about it practically of like, what's a good living or who should I be? And then the economic crash happened, and I was like, well, I guess it doesn't matter. I should do what I actually really want. Um, and so things just kept happening, or I had these different like seismic interruptions in my life that kept guiding me toward, like being an astrologer as my career. And like, I'm going to figure out how to do that. Like I'm going to find the coaches or study business or like do it rogue, but I'm going to be an astrologer. Like I went to school for philosophy and it's like that wasn't good for my career or whatever, like in a obvious sense, but it did. Like it was helpful. So I think there was something like this sense of, I could go the paranoid route and be like, we're being lied to or whatever. But it was just that idea that what people say is the way to be successful or the way to survive isn't necessarily true. You have to have a deeper sense of instinct and intuition. And I do think it's a psychological vulnerability of my generation to be really like disaster oriented, or to think like the world's going up in flames, so why not just like party until we die kind of vibe. Uh,
Hmm.
I mean, Pluto and Sag might be more fun loving than us. I think Pluto and Scorpio does it in a more depressive way, but there's basically this like fear of like, why even put down roots? I still kind of like, I move around a lot, like, um, for whatever reason, but I noticed that I'll like resist decorating wherever I live because I'm like, oh, I'm gonna move anyway. And I'm like, well, it's like I still eat every day. I like take care of my body. And it doesn't, it's like just because I'm gonna die one day doesn't mean I shouldn't like live. So I think there is something about the Taurus, like Pluto and Scorpio having to just do some things that are basic and nourishing and like calm down the disaster adrenaline, because there is a past life memory or trauma around the rug being pulled out from underneath us, which makes it hard for us to trust cultivating anything. And yet, cultivation is what will bring out that deeper psychological intelligence that we have. And that also the wisdom of cycles, where it's like you can cultivate, you can tend to life and be psychologically aware, know when things are coming to an end, know when change needs to happen. And that actually, yeah, is a gift for us when we know how to own that.
Could I ask, is your so you're a Taurus moon and a Pluto at Scorpio? Is that a tight
Yep.
opposition?
It's tight enough to be the biggest drama of my life. Yeah.
You're like, I'm here, but I don't want to decorate because it could. Yeah, I feel like that's that moon opposite Taurus, moon opposite Pluto. I need to be able to escape with as little stuff in my
Yeah.
duffel bag as possible when it's
And it's
when the
weird too,
stuff
like
goes down.
whenever I actually let myself decorate, magical stuff happens though. Like I do think that just even creating that ambiance for myself is like a key. It's like esoterically it opens things for me. Like so I
Yeah.
shouldn't resist
In
it.
this life,
But
you're
yeah, you
not in survival mode, is what I'm getting. Like as an Aries sun, in this life, you're not a witch who's going to be burned at the stake if you get caught, kind of thing.
no, no. And I actually like when I first started showing up on social media, my nervous system freaked out. Like I would post
Mm.
and then I would be pretty much like just reeling afterwards of like, what have I done? I can't believe like I put myself out there. Like I would be freaking out. And I basically just soothed myself and like grew my nervous system around it. but it was really intense and like Kundalini-esque. But I was like in my early 20s having Uranus transits and it was all good. But yeah, I feel like there was a clearing and a burning of karma of just like not buying into this paradigm that it's like dangerous for me to exist and express myself and be a presence on social media and all of that.
Oh, I love that. Oh, wow. Thank you for sharing that because so many people do have, yeah, do have this fear of not necessarily just social media, of speaking up, being seen. Yeah, and how you
Yeah.
walk through it despite the fear, I think is really helpful for people to hear. Yeah. Mm. So what about, oh yes, Pluto and Sagittarius.
I'm like, I love Pluto and Sagittarius. Um, they're so fun and funny, like obviously, because I feel like Jupiter is like jovial, like Sagittarius. So there's just like I feel like this is like a meme generation, like the humor on the internet and like just, yeah, I think there's um Pluto and Sagittarius also like they're I mean, I would think about too, like the United States, like as it had its Pluto return while Pluto was in Capricorn, but the like revolutionaries slash like founding fathers or whatever, like they were Pluto and Sagittarius. So as there's that sense of like, um, Sagittarius is about beliefs and it can be very cosmic, but there's also the kind of mundane, worldly beliefs, as in politics or how should we run the world, like what values should society abide by. And I think Sagittarius is actually really oriented toward thinking about that at like a social level. And then people that are more mystical and mystically inclined will go the kind of cosmic route with Sagittarius. Um, I think that the generation, we'll see what happens as they grow older, because I think there's also some things that maybe are developmentally more like young adult or teenage in some sense of just this, righteousness or opinionatedness or like we're right, you're wrong, like this kind of moral or like uh, superiority kind of complex. But I know like kids and like young adults do that. I feel like there's a phase at the like, 21 when you're having that Uranus, quarter life crisis where you're suddenly like realizing the faults of your parents and of society, and you're like have all this energy of youth and you're going against everything. So um, every generation does that. But I think Pluto and Sagittarius, there was like a especially like fiery kind of fervor around it. And I feel like while Pluto and Scorpios maybe have had more depressive stuff, I mean, actually, I don't know, Pluto and Sagittarius, there's depressive stuff around social media and being young with that. But I feel like generally there's like oh, just speak to like Pluto and Sagittarius in general, there's a need to have hope. There's a need to believe in expansion. And the dark night of the soul, or the challenge psychologically for Pluto and Sagittarius, would be feeling like the prospects are dismal, like there's nothing to look forward to. And there's a tendency in moments of disappointment or despair to kind of project that onto the future of like the way I feel now is the reality long term, and to be able to connect with like broadening one's perspective or seeing possibilities beyond one's limited unconscious filter at the moment would be empowering for Pluto and Sagittarius. um,
Yeah, I
so
think
yeah, I'm
I
very
get
curious to
cancel
see.
culture to me, like cancel culture. You don't agree with what I say or what I think the way I think. So like you're out feels very Pluto and the
Yeah,
Sagittarius to me.
totally. And it's like it comes from university culture in some sense. So maybe it was
Hmm.
like Pluto and Sag. And there was also like, um, I feel like with older generations did not know what was even coming when they would get like canceled by the younger generations. And yeah, yeah.
And
I'm
we're going to be
very
seeing a
curious.
lot of this Pluto, like with Mercury retrograde, the Pluto and Sag people. like around the holidays this year. Oh my God, I can only imagine the dinner
Well,
table.
that's the Pluto polarity point of Gemini is like being able to you know have conversations and connect and banter. I think that
Mhm.
when everything is a philosophical discourse and everything's philosophical debate, it's like the Gemini is lacking. It's like the ability to sit and talk shit like with people and it's not meaningful. You're just like bantering.
Yeah.
And to yeah, if people are so in their philosophy and they're like fighting to the death with it, it's like the Gemini is like have some other perspectives, like learn how to talk with people. And I think too, people may remain strong in their convictions,
Mhm.
but even if you really do want to be a persuasive person, being able to connect with people will support persuasion. If you're just like yelling at people and lecturing and being righteous, no one will listen. So,
Mhm. Yeah,
yeah.
I
Didn't
love
realize
that.
I was going to be roasting the Pluto and Sag, but I love them.
Well, Pluto roasts us all in some
Yeah.
way or form. Yeah, yeah. What about Capricorn?
I, so, I mean, a lot of them, they were young with the pandemic. So I'm thinking about like also the Pluto and Capricorn toddlers that were developing when people were wearing masks and they were not
Ooh.
seeing facial expressions. Like that's very, I don't know what's gonna, how that pans out. But I feel like there was a massive collective contraction during the pandemic. And that was not just Pluto and Capricorn, but it was the Pluto Saturn conjunction in Capricorn. Um, so I think some of them had maybe tough, and depending on how their parents related to the pandemic, because there were some kids that were like swimming in the pool and like driving to Malibu and whatever, like, and having
Mhm.
a great time with their friends. But there were other kids that were like stuck in, stuffy or negative home environments and, couldn't socialize normally. So this kind of pressure of,
And they
uh,
have Saturn in Aquarius, some of them.
yeah, yeah. So I think that Pluto and Capricorn, um, there's a much more serious undertone. There's a sense of needing to take responsibility. There's a unconscious guilt. And sometimes that unconscious guilt is like motivating a person's kind of good person behavior of like, I have to redeem myself for being bad, so I'm going to be good.
Mm.
Like these kind of complexes about how to be a person in the world. And ultimately breaking through and deconstructing that because there's going to be, there's a lack of interiority or nurturing of oneself that happens inside of that. Like if you build a life to be externally good, or externally successful, you need to develop some of that Cancerian counter to that of like, what, what do I really feel, but on seeing and empathizing with this kind of personality structure forming under pressure of like, uh, and coping through being good, right? Or coping through being the one that takes care of the mess of everyone else. It's like the parentified child that like has, is cleaning up the house when they're like 8 years old or something like that. Not that the whole generation is like that by any means, but it's just like these are like little adults. They're very serious, very enterprising, very, maybe have some business savvy. I think I have like um, no, these are probably Pluto and Sag kids that I'm thinking of, so never mind. But I mean, there was like a video of like a kid who gives advice in the New York subway station, and he was probably like 9 or something. And he was just saying like really wise things to people, and it was so sweet. So there's just a sense of like an internal like atlas. I'm carrying the world on my shoulders. I'm responsible. Um, yeah, and whatever pressures happened, for them in that created that in this life and in prior lives. But they're also going to be the ones that are like world building in this new uncertain era that we're entering.
Yeah.
So they are coming to that task with an ample amount of libidinal Pluto energy toward, building. And there's an ability also to delay gratification right, that creates repression. So, but they'll maybe have chapters of their life where they're putting their head down and just like going for it, like seeing the course, and later have to unpack whatever emotions they repressed or whatever emotions they weren't able to feel during that time. But they also have this kind of strength and fortitude in the fact that they can even do that. Like they're not just saying like, oh, I don't feel like it. They're showing up and like doing the work. So I'm
Yeah.
also curious to see how they're going to grow up and what influence they'll have on the world.
It'll be really interesting. And Jimmy makes a great point, Ross Jimmy, that to be American is voluntary membership. And with membership comes a duty and responsibility to others, family, and country. And we know where this is leading to, right? No separation from church and state. It'll be really interesting to see what happens with the new administration with the North Node in Pisces and Saturn and Neptune meeting in Aries, at zero Aries. There's all this push in the U.S. Like they're buying Bibles for kids in the South. It's like, yeah, this Pluto
Yeah,
and
the US
Capricorn generation.
is weird. There's so many different cultures and then like one main government,
Mhm.
but like the states are so different from one another. It's kind of,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's really
wild.
going to be wild to see how things unfold. Although, yeah, we'll see. Okay, let's see. There's a couple comments here. Let me see if there's anything. There's okay.
Uh,
Oh yeah, keep us.
Becca, House of the is saying Pluto and Sag generation have felt helpless in many ways around the lack of action from their elders. So yeah, they get in their heads and get stuck there because sometimes with the thought form becoming dogmatic.
Mm,
Yeah, that's why I like to think about the American like revolution and the Pluto return in Capricorn, where it's like the revolutionaries were Pluto and Sag. They were like, fuck this order. Like we have a different idea. Yeah.
hmm Yeah, yeah. And anything to say about Pluto and Aquarius? I mean, they're only like a
Oh,
year old,
yes.
a year and a half at the most. But
Well,
oh my God, we're entering this time, and I think we're really seeing the shadows emerge before we get to the exciting part.
yeah, I'm really curious. Like even the way that we're talking about Pluto and Aquarius, like we haven't even been fully initiated into the transit yet. And I think that there's something, what I think about the most with this transit is like sci-fi and dystopian movies where there's like this kind of structure, this order, and then there's like one person who's kind of like awakening out of it, and they're like looking around at people and they're like, this isn't normal, right? And then the secret agents come out and they're like trying to make them stop awakening. Like I think that there's a power struggle with Pluto and Aquarius around awakening, and that can play out socially, culturally. It can also be an internal nervous system thing. I think, like, for example, the paradigm of addiction running a person's system, it's like that's the law, like, of the person's body is this addiction pattern. And if you try to kind of liberate the soul essence from the shackles of, um, you know, whatever traumas are overlaying that soul essence, the defense mechanisms of the psyche fight back. There's an actual part of our psyche that resists our own awakening. Um, and, being able to move past whatever it is that's holding us back. Right. So I think with Pluto and Aquarius, there's a lot of maybe dissociation or parts of us being offline. And I think the imagery of like the virtual reality or the people that are like hooked up and getting fed intravenously while they like live in a fake reality is like a dramatization, hopefully not a real reality, but like a dramatization of this deep disassociation, this deep freeze, this deep disconnection from reality. And what if it's unconscious? that's what's so creepy about these movies where people are living in a simulated reality and they start to awaken inside of the simulation and they're like, whoa. Like I think like Pluto and Aquarius will be like, and I like to highlight like these matrices exist everywhere. I think it's really common to look at it of like us versus them, or it's like, the government is, or these like powerful people up here. And it's like you can look at it that way. And I think I I think when people have a significant amount of power or money or whatnot, there are these dynamics that constellate of like keeping that power or whatever. So that's one layer that people can look at it, but it's also happening inside. Like our actual bodies and nervous systems have these power struggles of, what's the paradigm, what's our sense of being regulated, and what's like so taboo that we get triggered and can't handle it. And then the defense mechanisms that try to bring us back to homeostasis. So I think that might be the biggest personal drama of Pluto and Aquarius is just like uh, inner freedom and seeing what is the matrix that I'm stuck inside of, right? Like someone could have like a really strong attachment dysfunction, anxious or avoidant or whatever, maybe anxious. We'll use that as an example. And then they're projecting this whole psychodrama onto the people that they're in relationship with. That's not fully authentic. It's like their own attachment trauma that they're projecting and they believe in and haven't deconstructed. Um, and yeah, what it's like to wake up in the middle of that simulation and be like, oh, this is just a like a computer program in my mind that's making me behave this way and like think this way. I think that will be uh, there will be a lot of growth potential with Pluto and Aquarius in terms of breaking free from unconscious paradigms. But yeah, it's hard work.
Yeah, and I for Pluto and Aquarius, my oh, thank you so much, Jimmy, for the badge.
What is
Pluto and
this
Aquarius.
badge? Did someone tip you?
Yes, isn't that nice, Jimmy? I got Turn the Beat Around is the song for Pluto and Aquarius to me, in terms of like, these Capricornian structures have been like, smushing people down and then the people rising up. The woman in New Zealand to me is like, this is the face of Pluto and Aquarius who did the haka dance. Have you been paying attention to that? Oh,
No.
you've got to see it. You've got to follow this. I think you will find it fascinating. I'll DM it to you. She's an MP in New Zealand, and they're fighting because they're trying to tear up a treaty between the Maori and was it the British who over came over there and colonized, and they're like a million Maori strong are protesting right now.
Wow.
So in New Zealand, it's really incredible. I'll send you the video that's going around the world.
Yeah,
It's
I
really
love that too, actually, because I think that there's like these different grids that we're living inside of, and I think that like indigenous intelligence, like there was like a way of connecting with the earth and receiving, divination from the land, or like the, relationship with the deities, the ceremonies, like that's real. And if
yeah.
you enter like a skyscraper and like the business sector of New York, that grid is real because people made it, and you can't access like Pachamama there in the same way that you can in like the Andes or something. So I think Pluto and Aquarius will also be about like, yeah, it's like these different um, power struggles between grids, basically.
Oh, I love that. Mm. Well, this has been fascinating. We're up a little over the hour, but I want to thank
Oh,
you
I
so
like
much
didn't
for
even notice the time.
I
Sorry.
know we're having such a great conversation. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much. Now tell everybody how they can find you and anything else you want to share.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was so fun to just like riff about Pluto, and yeah, thank you. I have a podcast, Magic of the Spheres. I'm on YouTube, Sabrina Monarch. These days, that's where I share the most. Um, and you can find me through my Instagram here and my link tree. You can find my mailing list, ways to work with me. And I'm teaching my next evolutionary astrology intensive. For those of you who like to plan ahead, we're beginning again April 8th in 2025 because it's currently in session. And yeah, this is a signature course I've been teaching since like 2018 as a way to initiate people into the language and fluency with evolutionary astrology. So
Ah, wonderful. It was so good to see you again, and I hope to see you again soon at another conference or something.
yeah, I would love that.
Yeah. Well, take good care, Sabrina. And yeah, I'll send you that thing about New Zealand. Thank you, everyone,
Okay,
for coming and for watching. And I'll make it, if you want, I'll make you a collaborator if you want to put this on your wall.
I would love to. Thanks, Celeste.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.